wind arrives first. Not the gentle breeze that stirs summer grass, but something else entirely. A living force that strips heat from flesh and drives ice crystals like needles through any gap in clothing. This is the Mongolian steppe in winter. Minus 50 degrees Celsius, nearly 100 degrees below freezing. On this treeless plain, larger than Western Europe, there is nowhere to hide except that for over 1,000 years, Mongol families did more than hide here. They thrived. They built homes that could vanish with the sunrise and reappear before sunset. Mobile fortresses engineered not for comfort, but for something far more precious. Survival through the kind of cold that kills exposed skin in minutes. The Mongols called the worst winters Su. When summer drought gives way to catastrophic cold and snow so deep it buries entire herds. These weren't just harsh seasons. They were tests of everything their ancestors had learned about wind, felt, fire, and the delicate mathematics of staying alive on a landscape that offered no mercy. Tonight we enter their world. A world where shelter placement could mean the difference between life and death for an entire family. Where the warmth of animals and the thickness of felt walls formed the only barrier between human life and the endless killing cold of the open steppe. By October, the Mongol herder becomes part meteorologist, part landscape architect. The race against winter has begun. The decision of where to build the winter camp. The Otag determined everything that would follow. Get it wrong and the wind would find you. The snow would bury you. The cold would claim not just the family but the hundreds of sheep, goats, and horses that formed their entire world. The steppe appears endless, uniform, rolling grassland stretching beyond every horizon. But to trained eyes, it revealed critical variations, subtle depressions in the land, rock outcroppings that would block wind. Most importantly, the southern faces of hills and mountains that would catch winter sun. This was called Na, the art of finding the shadow of the mountain. The ideal winter ground lay in a shallow valley or on the protected side of elevated terrain. Here, the killing winds from Siberia would pass overhead, deflected by the natural barriers. The southern exposure would capture every degree of warmth from the low winter sun, critical for both human comfort and livestock survival. Even a few degrees could mean the difference between snow that melted enough to expose grass and snow that remained a frozen barrier to grazing. Water determined the second requirement. Even frozen solid, a stream or small river provided the only reliable source for both animals and humans. Winter camps were positioned within walking distance of these ice-locked lifelines where daily chopping through the surface could access the flowing water beneath. Timing the migration required reading weather patterns inherited across generations. Families would use the final weeks of autumn to fatten their herds on remaining grass, watching for the atmospheric signs that preceded the first major snows. Too early and valuable grazing time was lost. Too late and heavy snow could block the routes to winter ground, trapping herds in the open where they would freeze or starve. The movement itself was a careful retreat. Thousands of animals driven across miles of increasingly hostile terrain to reach the pre-selected refuge before the steppe turned lethal. Archaeological evidence suggests these winter camp locations were used repeatedly across decades, chosen and maintained by families who understood that the knowledge of safe ground was more valuable than any physical possession. By November, as the first serious storms approached, the Mongol herders had completed their strategic withdrawal. They had found their shadow of the mountain. Now came the even more critical task, building a fortress that could move. A single yurt standing alone on the winter steppe would not survive a serious storm. The genius of Mongol winter survival lay not in individual shelters but in their collective arrangement. The transformation of separate dwellings into a unified defensive system. The winter camp formation was called a kur, meaning circle. But this was no casual arrangement. The positioning of each family's gr followed principles refined across centuries of Arctic survival. The yurts formed a tight circle or U-shape, doors facing south or southeast to avoid the prevailing winds while capturing maximum sunlight. The spaces between structures were minimized, creating an almost continuous wall of felt and wood. This circular fortress blocked wind at ground level, where it carried the most deadly chill while creating a protected microclimate in the center. Most crucially, the central area became a heat trap where temperatures could be several degrees warmer than the surrounding steppe. Into this protected core went the most valuable assets, the livestock. Each evening, as temperatures plunged toward lethal levels, the herders would drive sheep, goats, and young cattle into the sheltered center of the camp. Here was the most sophisticated element of the entire system, the use of animals as both heating and insulation. 100 sheep generate substantial collective body heat clustered together in the wind-blocked center. Their combined warmth could raise the ambient temperature by 5 to 10 degrees Celsius. Their bodies formed a secondary windbreak, a living barrier that absorbed the residual wind that passed over the outer ring of yurts. The arrangement was symbiotic. Human structures protected the animals from wind exposure while animal bodies protected the humans from the full fury of steppe winter. Where materials allowed, the camp's defenses were reinforced with low walls of stacked stone or even frozen blocks of dried dung argil. These walls stood only waist-high, but served crucial functions, disrupting ground-level wind that could slip between the yurts and preventing drifting snow from accumulating inside the camp perimeter. Archaeological excavations of winter campsites reveal post holes and stone arrangements that confirm these defensive layouts. The camps were temporary but engineered, designed for rapid construction and equally rapid dismantling when spring returned. Every element served the central purpose, creating a pocket of survivable conditions in one of Earth's most hostile environments. By December, as the worst cold settled over the steppe, the cure had become a fortress of felt and flesh, warm-blooded and carefully arranged to turn the landscape's own features into shields against its fury. Step inside a winter ja and enter one of humanity's most refined solutions to extreme cold survival. The yurt's distinctive shape, circular base, domed roof, represents thousands of years of aerodynamic refinement. Wind encountering this form flows around rather than against it, following the curved surfaces without finding edges to grab or flat walls to batter. The low profile presents minimal surface area to the moving air that carries away heat. But the shape was only the foundation. The true defense against -50°C lay in the insulation system. Winter jars were wrapped in up to 12 layers of thick felt, a material that remains one of the most effective insulators ever developed. Felt is a dense matrix of interlocked wool fibers that creates millions of tiny air pockets. These trapped air spaces resist heat transfer, maintaining the temperature differential between inside and outside that meant the difference between life and death. The felt layers were arranged strategically. Inner layers provided the primary insulation while outer coverings offered wind and moisture protection. The outermost layer was often canvas treated with animal fat or other waterproofing agents, preventing snow and ice from penetrating to the insulating felt beneath. Archaeological analysis of preserved felt fragments shows material so dense and well-crafted that modern synthetic insulators struggle to match its thermal properties. The central hearth, the zu, formed the system's heart. The iron stove was positioned directly beneath the roof's crown opening, the tunnel, creating a powerful convection system. Hot air rose and escaped through the roof vent, drawing fresh air in through carefully controlled gaps at floor level. This circulation prevented deadly carbon monoxide buildup while distributing heat throughout the small space. Fire was life. The central flame was maintained continuously through the coldest months, fed with dried animal dung that burned hot and clean. Families organized shifts to ensure the fire never died during the night hours when temperatures reached their lethal minimums. The floor received equal attention. Ground contact could drain body heat as effectively as wind exposure, so the earth was covered with multiple layers of old felt, animal hides placed first side up, and dried grasses. This insulated foundation prevented the frozen ground from leaching warmth from anyone sitting or sleeping inside. Even the interior organization followed thermal principles. Sleeping areas were positioned away from the door, where cold air entered, and closer to the fire and the back wall, where heat accumulated. Storage areas held extra felt blankets and fur coverings that could be added as layers during the worst storms. The result was a space that could maintain temperatures 40 to 50 degrees warmer than the external air. When the steppe reached -50°, the interior of a well-managed J could stay above 10 degrees Celsius, cold by modern standards, but warm enough for human survival when combined with proper clothing and bedding. This wasn't comfort. This was precision engineering for endurance, refined across generations of families who understood that every detail of their shelter could determine whether they would live to see spring. When the sun disappeared behind the steppe horizon and temperatures plunged toward their nightly lows, the Mongol family's survival strategy shifted to its most critical phase. Sleeping through the killing cold, privacy became a luxury no one could afford. Families slept together in close quarters, sharing body heat that could mean the difference between waking up and freezing to death during the night. Parents, children, and any guests or visiting relatives arranged their sleeping areas to maximize collective warmth. Often sleeping so close they could feel each other breathing. No one undressed for sleep. The Mongols slept fully clothed in their daily attire. The heavy deal robes that provided insulation even while lying down. Only the heaviest outer coats were removed, and these were used as additional blankets rather than hung up to freeze overnight. The bedding system formed another layer in the defensive stack against cold. Sleeping platforms were built up from the insulated floor using thick felt mats called shti. These created an air gap between human bodies and the ground, preventing the earth from drawing away precious heat during the long night hours. Coverings were heavy fur blankets made from sheep skin, wolf pelts, or other animal hides. These materials trapped warm air close to the body, while their weight prevented heat loss through convection. Families who could afford it used multiple blanket layers, creating insulation systems comparable to modern Arctic sleeping gear. But the most sophisticated element of cold night survival was the integration of animals into the human sleeping space. On the coldest nights when exterior temperatures dropped to -40 degrees C or below, newborn lambs, goat kids, and calves were brought inside the GI. These small animals were housed in a designated area near the door, close enough to add their body heat to the interior environment, but positioned so their presence didn't interfere with human sleeping areas. The thermal contribution was significant. A few young animals could raise the interior temperature by several degrees. And in the mathematics of extreme cold survival, every degree mattered. Their small bodies generated heat continuously through the night. Heat that would otherwise have been lost to the vast cold of the steppe. This arrangement served multiple survival functions. The animals' warmth helped humans survive the night. The shelter ensured the young livestock survived until morning, protecting the family's economic future, and the shared space strengthened the symbiotic relationship between herder families and their animals, a partnership that defined Mongol life. Sleep itself became a survival skill. Families learned to position themselves to share maximum body heat while ensuring everyone had access to warm air circulating from the central fire. Children were placed between adults to benefit from the most body heat. The elderly, whose bodies generated less warmth, received extra blankets and priority positioning near the fire. Archaeological evidence from winter campsites includes small animal bones mixed with human artifacts near hearth areas, confirming these shared sleeping arrangements. The practice continued through recent historical periods and can still be observed in traditional Mongol communities during severe weather. By dawn, when the fire was rebuilt and hot tea prepared, the family had survived another night that would have killed unprepared humans within hours. They had used their bodies, their animals, and their perfectly engineered shelter to create a pocket of life inside nature's attempt to freeze them to death. Every element of the Mongol winter camp served multiple functions within a holistic survival system that modern engineering is only beginning to fully understand. The dried dung fuel argol wasn't simply the only available combustible material on the treeless steppe. It burned at high temperatures with minimal smoke, making it ideal for heating small spaces without creating dangerous carbon monoxide levels. Its density meant a winter supply could be stored in compact piles that wouldn't overwhelm the limited interior space of a GR. The felt patterns and decorative elements that appeared purely ornamental actually served structural functions. The geometric designs reinforced stress points where wind pressure concentrated, distributing forces across the felt covering to prevent tears or gaps that would allow heat to escape. Colors and patterns also served navigation purposes during blizzards when families needed to identify their own shelters in conditions of near-zero visibility. The social organization of winter camps followed thermal efficiency principles. Related families positioned their GRs to share windbreak benefits while maintaining independent heating systems. Extended family clusters could support each other during emergencies while distributing survival risk across multiple households. The symbiotic relationship between humans and animals reached its peak refinement during winter months. Livestock provided heat, fuel, dung, food, milk, and occasional meat and raw materials, wool and hides, while humans provided shelter, protection from predators, and managed grazing that ensured animal survival until spring. This integrated system could be dismantled and reassembled in a matter of hours. When weather patterns changed or grazing conditions demanded relocation, the entire winter fortress could be packed onto horses and camels and moved to a new location. No permanent infrastructure was abandoned. No resources were wasted. No trace remained on the landscape. The engineering principles embedded in these survival systems influenced military tactics, trade networks, and political organization across the Mongol Empire. The same mobility and environmental adaptation that enabled winter survival also enabled rapid military movement across vast distances, giving Mongol armies strategic advantages that shaped medieval history. Modern survival experts and Arctic researchers continue to study traditional Mongol shelter design, insulation techniques, and heating systems. Contemporary emergency shelters, military cold weather gear, and extreme environment habitats incorporate principles first perfected by nomadic herders on the Mongolian steppe. The psychological dimensions of this survival system were equally sophisticated. Families who could maintain their traditional way of life through the worst winters developed profound confidence in their ability to survive any environmental challenge. This psychological resilience supported cultural continuity across centuries of political upheaval and climate variation. The catastrophic winter that tested every survival system to its limits, occurred roughly once per decade. When it came, bringing the deepest cold, the heaviest snows, and the most persistent winds, the Mongol winter camp system faced its ultimate test. Archaeological evidence suggests that while individual camps might fail, the overall survival rate through these extreme events was remarkably high. Testament to the engineering sophistication of the entire system. Climate records preserved in ice cores and tree rings confirmed that Mongol herders survived winter conditions equivalent to those found in modern Antarctica using only materials they could carry and knowledge passed down through generations of families who understood that their lives depended on perfect adaptation to their environment. The Mongol winter camp was never designed for comfort. It was engineered for something far more demanding. The transformation of one of Earth's most hostile environments into home. Consider the profound knowledge embedded in every decision. The reading of landscape features to find wind protection. The mathematics of shelter placement to create thermal microclimates. The material science of felt insulation and aerodynamic design. The integration of animal and human survival systems into a unified whole. This wasn't primitive survival. It was sophisticated environmental engineering that enabled human civilization to flourish in conditions that would challenge modern technology. The deepest lesson lies not in the specific techniques but in the mindset they reveal. The Mongols succeeded because they never tried to dominate their environment. Instead, they became so perfectly adapted to it that they could carry their entire world with them, setting it up each night and packing it away each morning, leaving no trace except the families who survived to see another spring. Their mobile winter fortresses prove that mastery over nature doesn't require conquering it. True mastery means understanding it so completely that you become part of it, finding ways to thrive within its rules rather than breaking them. When the spring winds finally returned to melt the snow and green the grass, the felt walls came down. The livestock moved out onto the open steppe, and the winter camps vanished as if they had never existed. But the families who built them remained, carrying forward the knowledge that had kept them alive through the coldest nights on Earth. In a world increasingly concerned with climate change and extreme weather survival, the Mongol winter camp offers a different model. Not the heated building that fights against cold, but the adaptive system that flows with it, finding life in the spaces between the killing wind and the frozen ground. Turning the steppe itself into shelter and proving that humans can make homes anywhere they understand deeply enough.